Unleashed in Nyanza have put Raila partners in NASA, that's Mudavadi, Kalonzo and Wetangula, under pressure to deliver the presidency so that their regions can benefit. Of course, an interesting way to look at this, even as the leaders from the larger Western region sort of feel sidelined despite giving their support to ODM leader Raila Odinga during the just concluded elections. All this has to do with the link between politics and development. We'll get to canvass that particular story, even as the Daily Nation goes big over the row over the scheme to delay the 2022 polls. An interesting question put right here. Even as the law states, the Constitution requires a general election to be held on the second Tuesday of August, but proponents of the BBI insist that a referendum must be held before the country goes to an election. But politicians, even allied to Deputy President Dr. William Ruto, see this as a ploy to extend the life of Parliament and vow to resist it. More details on page 4. Those are the big stories the two dailies are going with. Even as it was a big day in the City of Champions, both papers going big with the Eldoret City Marathon that was just concluded. And of course, it was an athlete's day out in Eldoret after such a tough year where we saw very little developments on the track and fields. This was definitely good news coming out of Eldoret. We'll definitely delve deeper into some of the stories covered in the dailies just to keep you up to speed. And later on, we'll get to explore the issues around the executive and the judiciary. The appointing power of President Uhuru Kenyatta has been put into question this coming after he failed to appoint the 6 judges due to what he calls integrity issues from his intelligence service, NIS included. But does the power of the president actually include such a move? Did the writers of the Constitution envisage such? We'll definitely inform you about that. Allow me to introduce my panelists. Joining me in studio to help us deliberate on these matters and more, I'm joined by Dr. Njogu Barua, who's the former Gishugu Member of Parliament. A very good morning to you.
Good morning, Jesse. Thanks for having me.
It's great to have you with us.
You.
I'm also joined by Arthur Odera, who is the former Teso North Member of Parliament. Good morning.
Good morning, Jesse, and a nice new month.
Nice new month, quite so. Definitely, we're also joined by Joseph Kioko, who is a political analyst, not a new face to the show. Good morning.
Good morning, Jesse, and good morning, Kenya.
Well, it's great to have you, gentlemen. Allow us to get the show on the road. We begin with the latest stories around the handshake politics, and allow us to take a look at this particular story that was filed just yesterday night, where ODM leader Raila Odinga is a man under siege. The former Prime Minister is on the receiving end for allegedly using handshake to negotiate development for his Luo Nyanza region, completely disregarding the neighboring Western region, which has a section of leaders actually say has always had his back. This following 7 key projects unveiled by President Uhuru Kenyatta just before the Madaraka Day celebrations in the Lake City. Now, senior political affairs reporter Jeff Kirui with the intrigues that is threatening Raila Odinga's foothold of the Western region vote bloc. Take a look.
President Uhuru Kenyatta has newfound dalliance with the Lake City of Kisumu.
Sijui kama mama nyumbani ataniruhusu, akiniruhusu labda naweza kupata mtu wa kuwa ananitengenezea mambo yangu upande hizi.
This courtesy of the March 9th, 2018 handshake between himself and former bitter foe-turned friend ODM leader Raila Odinga. In the period, Uhuru Kenyatta has been to Kisumu 5 times, launching key projects that has demystified the long-running development neglect of the region, which has in the past regimes been relegated as a result of their political choices and fate of being in the opposition.
Hii mwanzo ni kwanza kuunganisha Wakenya wewe kama kitu kimoja. Bila hiyo hakuna maendeleo. Na hiyo ndio maana ya handshake.
But in Kenyatta's dalliance with Raila Odinga comes another political animosity. A section of leaders from Western region, a part of the initial NASA Dream Team, are unhappy over the newfound friendship that has left them in the periphery. But for them, their anger is directed at Raila Odinga, a man they have supported to the hilt in the past general elections.
Raila Odinga is where he is because of our votes, and he has forgotten to represent the people of Western region. How I wish when he sits on that table of handshake with the president, he should be able to articulate issues of Western region. At the moment, we are having a problem with Mumias Sugar Company being resuscitated. In President Uhuru Kenyatta's last visit to Kisumu, he unveiled 7 key projects, among them the 3.8 billion shillings rehabilitated Nakuru-Kisumu meter gauge railway, 350 million shillings ultra-modern Uhuru Business Park, and 3 billion shillings refurbished Kisumu port. You have 2 wives. If you buy meat, you take 1 kg to the wife belonging to the Luo community, another kg to the wife belonging to the Luo community. Why should you take all to one wife?
The handshake is not benefiting us. And if it has to benefit us, can it benefit us before the next election? So that we are able to see the real fruits of this handshake, what we worked for. Because it was not a single-handed work by the ODM alone.
The focus of development in Raila's backyard, threatening Raila's hold of the Western region bloc.
Our people feel marginalized, and I can assure you that anger is going to be portrayed in the coming elections.
Political analyst Professor Herman Manyora, however, says the leaders from Western region should take responsibility for development or lack of it.
If Raila uses his political power to get something for his people, you can't blame him. You can only blame yourself. Nobody should also accumulate sufficient power and become resourceful enough with the Wetangula to force their way into the center stage of this country. Why are they lamenting?
How will Musalia drive development for his area when he's not in government? The handshake is semi-government. Musalia was behind Raila. So Musalia has to negotiate through Raila and President Uhuru, because this is a handshake project.
However, ODM Deputy Party Leader and Kakamega Governor Wycliffe Oparanya, though acknowledging the concerns of the region being left out, has come to the defense of his boss Raila Odinga.
Na ndio tunataka rais mwenyewe akuja hapa vile amekuwa Kisumu. Wakati alikuwa Kakamega tulikuwa na Mashujaa Day 2019. Hatukuwa na mipango vile tumekuwa na mipango sahi.
So I think this is a discussion that him and Raila should be talking before he goes to State House. How can you become a deputy party leader of a party which is headed by somebody who sits at the highest table of this republic, and yet you are still complaining like other people? We are the ones who should be complaining.
The handshake has given the Lake City a new lease, currently relishing the fruits of the handshake that has seen the opposition more or less part of the government in President Uhuru Kenyatta's last term in office. Jeff Kirui, KTN News.
Well, that's the House of Cards report, just highlighting what has been covered on today's dailies. The big story on the Standard: handshake goodies split Raila's allies. Gentlemen, allow us to delve into this particular discussion. Arthur Odera, what's your take on this? Because it seems there is pressure on the former NASA leaders to deliver the presidency so that their regions can benefit. And they argue that they were part of NASA, and now in one or the other, their regions feel marginalized. What do you make of this?
I see this as reactions to the president's high-profile visit to Kisumu and Siaya. And because the president was there, and because the president switched on his media machinery, the projects were highlighted, his presence was highlighted, all his comments are highlighted, and all the reactions were highlighted in relation to it. However, if we take a step back from the reactions to the visit and examine the facts and figures on the ground, number one, the projects that were launched in, let's say, Luo Nyanza, particularly Kisumu and Siaya, are more highlighted because the president is there. not necessarily because they are that large. And I'll give you an example. There is a solar power project of 20 billion going on in Garissa. There is a wind project, a big one going on in Turkana. There is oil mining going on in Turkana. There is a wind project going on in Nyandarua with a lot of money invested in it. Kitale-Lodwar Road is being done for tens of billions of shillings. And there are many, many different projects in Kakamega and beyond that are going on. These are reactions. And I think the thrust of these reactions is about 2022. It's not about facts and figures on the ground. It's about, I think they're trying to demonize Raila so that they promote whatever their candidate is for 2022. I see it in that perspective. I mean, if you examine the leadership integrity, the morality of these leaders, Musalia Mudavadi has access to the president, almost uninhibited access to the president. Did he lobby and was he denied? That's a big question. Number two, as elected leaders speaking about lack of development among their people, really, is the onus not on them? So that if it is deemed that it is important for them to push Musalia, for Musalia to push Raila, for Raila to push the president, for the president to deliver, then why are they not doing it? And you know, I look at this and I look at what has been happening over the last 2 weeks. There is a business magnate called Mr. I think Narendra Raval, the owner of Devki Mills. He offered to resuscitate Mumias Sugar Company. And he said, you know, he'll put in money and start the plant. You know what that means? It means hundreds, actually thousands, tens of thousands of farmers will get an income, will get back to business. Mumias town and neighboring towns will kick back into life. The factory and the people employed in it will get their employment back and the incomes, and that has a big effect on life. And generally, the economy of Western would be affected positively by the resuscitation of Mumias. And you see what that would do, it will also encourage resuscitation and optimization of the nearby Zoya sugar factory, because that region is generally a sugarcane region. Sugarcane does well, and therefore if there is a miller who is ready and pays farmers in time, the farmers will farm sugarcane and they will make money. Guess what happened? The leaders started squabbling in public. There was even fighting in a funeral. I mean, clearly, if you're committed to a project, as the leaders said, the way to discuss these things would be the leaders to lock themselves behind a room, have a meeting with the investor, iron out all the issues, come to the Wananchi and tell them, you know what, we have represented you well, this is what we've agreed with the investor starts work on this day, and we expect the plant to start milling sugar on this day. Instead, squabbling happened, and I think it was all about positioning. Why am I not in the gravy train? Why is it you who is having the discussion and not me? In the process, a big investor who is ready with money that is going to help the life of farmers, the life of the local economy, has withdrawn. Now, if you take the Kisumu port, you can only have it in Kisumu. You can't have it in Kakamega. There is no water in Kakamega. There is no lake. You can't have it in Bungoma. The port is a national project. It can only be in Kisumu because Kisumu has water that connects to Entebbe, Musoma, Bukoba, Jinja, and so on. And it is in the interest of regional trade. The water project in Siaya could as well be done anywhere else. And there have been water projects. I know there was a water project in somewhere in Sirisia constituency fairly recently that was activated. Recently, the president gave Kibabi a charter to become a fully fledged university, and so on and so forth. But because this is happening now, and we are positioning ourselves for 2022, the decibel is much higher than it should, if you ask me. And you see, at the end of the day, if elected leaders in Kakamega are blaming Raila for not bringing them development, is that a recognition of Raila as their leader? If it is about the votes for 2027, then we should be working together proactively and acknowledging that relationship at all times and say, you know what, you're our leader. As you arrange for projects to go to Luo Nyanza, can you please arrange for us as well? But you know, the relationship has been one of bickering and fighting. And you then have to ask yourself, what responsibility must Raila carry for the development that has come to Luo Nyanza at this point in time? Is it him? or is it the president trying to make peace with the Luo nation?
Okay.
There are critical questions to be asked, but I think there is an ownership problem with the leaders who are speaking. They are all elected leaders, incidentally. There is a focus they should have, which is about reviving Mumias and avoiding the squabbling. It's not happening. And Raila then should ask himself, do I owe Western this amount of development?
Okay.
If he does, then he should have a discussion with these elected leaders. However, it takes a constructive relationship for that kind of discussion to take place.
Kioko, let's talk about the politics of tokenism, even as you add your voice to this, because many might argue the development projects that were launched were sort of a token to give back due to the handshake specifically. What's your take?
First, Jesse, let us appreciate that all politics is local. And for the Raila base, the local politics of Raila is defined around Luo Nyanza region. And that bastion of his was restless. Remember, this visit comes after the BBI ruling by the judiciary. It comes after the by-election loss in Juja and the somehow fluid situation in Central Province. The base, Raila's base was restless. They needed to be assured. That is why when you look at the conduct of the president wide in Luo Nyanza, even up to Madaraka Day celebration, the main theme of his discussion was to calm the restfulness within Luo Nyanza, which is BBI is on course, I am not the enemy is judiciary. I think that was the clear message, even going beyond his call and saying that if we have Orengo on our side, Senator Orengo on our side, do you think we will lose? You know, he went out of his way to appease Raila's base because all politics is local. Those projects, when you look at them, and even when you look at the amount, and even in the discussions the leadership of the Luo Nyanza region was having with the president, there was a comment that came out that some of these projects might not even be in the budget, or they have not have been factored in the budget-making process. But let us push them, have a committee to make sure that they are included, and even if they are not completed by the end of my term, we must get to a point where 50% of them are done. What that means is that it gives Raila's base that comfort of saying, even if the political route did not happen, the development path, we saw a lot that is happening. I think that is that must be made clear by all and sundry in the politics that we are playing. Secondly, and what is also critical, is that the leadership of Mulembe Nation, as expressed by the clip that we saw, you must appreciate that there is a communication problem. There is something they want to communicate, but they are not going about it in the right manner. How do you say you want Mudavadi to run for presidency, and then you want an intermediary to negotiate on behalf of Western? Why don't you blame the president for not bringing these goodies to Western directly? Why are you blaming Raila? Raila is not the president. It's actually a statement of weakness that you're saying Raila should bring goodies in Western because you voted for him. Yet you have governors from Western. I do know that there is a Western parliamentarian caucus that should be able to be organized to meet the president in their own right as leadership of the Mulembe Nation. And then they discuss their project. So to go back and say, for us as the leadership of Western, we are demanding that Raila negotiates on our behalf. Yet on the other side, you are here castigating that Raila has been taking Mulembe Nation for a ride. It is really miscommunication at its very best. I do not think that is what they wanted to say, but best for me, I would advise the former Deputy Prime Minister Musalia Mudavadi is to take these guys through a lesson in communication. They are not helping his cause. They are not helping Mulembe Nation's cause. If it is an issue of Western Kenya and development priorities that need to be happened, remember, the Kakamega governor used to be the chairman of the Council of Governors, and he enjoyed unfettered access to the president. Musalia Mudavadi, by his nature, he is a close friend to the president, Honorable Uhuru. So there is no barrier, and there should not be any barrier that stops Musalia Mudavadi from organizing Western leadership to present a demand for the president and organize an event of such a tour if it needs to be done. It's the same way like saying, asking Kamba people to complain that Raila Odinga is not urging the president to bring development in Makueni. Yet, through and through, we know that our Kamba kingpin is Kalonzo Musyoka. It defeats the entire purpose of conversation. Thirdly, and I think this is critical too, we are all taxpayers. And one of the principles in the Constitution is equitable distribution of national resources. I do not think that when Luo Nyanza gains, we lose as a country. I do not think by development of Port Victoria, there is a part of Kenya that is losing. I do not think so. And we must appreciate the political and economic marginalization of Luo Nyanza as a region. And if these things are able to be seen as affirmative action, we must be able to be appreciative. Still, we ask, let the president see Kenya from an equitable lens. Let him ensure that whatever the central government projects that were started are completed in Estenya. Let his approach to development be viewed not from the lens of political goodies or political returns perspective, but from the need to develop Kenya. Because Kenya will not develop, or the development of Kenya will be affected by the weakest part or the least developed part in this country. Let the president have that prism of equitable distribution of resources. To me, that is the priority. Other conversations are neither here nor there.
Okay, so Dr. what's your take on this? When an elected leader says our people feel marginalized because we voted for so-and-so during the election and we expect more in terms of development, well, what do you make of such statements?
Thank you, Jesse. And what I think about that statement from the onset is that the people of that region, the leaders of that region, that's the Western region, which is complaining and just endorsing or confirming the fact that Raila Odinga has overpowered them in their own base. They are not able to get their acts together and get a spokesman. As my co-panelists have been saying, we have had Musalia Mudavadi as a vice president. He could have done a lot for his community. We had Oparanya as the chairman of Council of Governors. He could have also used that opportunity, if need be, to get some development in that region. What is happening is that you look at NASA. NASA also included Kalonzo Musyoka. Kalonzo is not complaining. Neither is his base complaining. Because Kalonzo's base is not directly affected by Raila's position. What is happening is that Raila Odinga has a full control on his rural base and a major control on the Western region. None of the Western region leaders, Musalia and Oparanya included, and Wetangula, can claim more support from Western than Raila Odinga. So that's why they are complaining. The worst thing, the other problem here is that the leaders in Western province, they sometimes claim that NASA is dead. If the NASA is dead, how do they expect to get development or support from a leader who they don't recognize? So the time has come for them to put their act together and support, benefit their own community. The other thing I would like to say is that my own view on this issue is a big personal, political, and development agenda by the president. If you look at what is happening in Nyanza, this simple act of opening projects in Nyanza province, which those people really deserve, and they're also part of Kenya, and some projects are actually of national importance, has divided the Raila base, because Raila was the supremo in Western and Nyanza.
All right.
And we look at Mutuli's coronation, it has divided the Mount Kenya base. So there is this initiative to ensure that regional blocks do not stay together by 2022, so that all these initiatives of extending the term of the parliament, the term of government, could easily be discussed and negotiated, because when a house is divided, it is easier for it to be manipulated. You look at the coast, the governors of the coast cannot talk the same voice because they are divided by exterior forces. Finally, I'd like to say that, as I stated last week, the projects which the president opened were done in the right place at the right time, and we have no problem with that. But I think it's also very important to note that we are celebrating a project delivered by the president 60 years after independence. 60 years after independence, we have not embraced constitutionalism. whereby development is negotiated at the national level and taken to all parts of the countries equally. We are still talking about tokenism. This is something you have to get rid of, because the role of the national government and the president in particular is to lead the policy process and ensure that he acts like the father of the nation and distributes resources.
So let me ask you, in your view, was this tokenism or real development from the national government?
To my view, this was real development with a political objective.
Okay.
Because number one, if you look at President Kenyatta, he is a Kikuyu. There is a big divide has existed between the Luos and the Kikuyu community or Mount Kenya community since independence. And this thing started during the rule of the first Kenyatta. So I think it is in the interest of Kenyatta too to ensure that by the time he exits power, and for him to get a good legacy from that region, that unites the two communities together. So I think that's the development. That's the agenda, one of the agenda.
Okay.
The other agenda is to ensure that you don't have sizable blocks, either Mount Kenya or Western blocks, which you can be able to challenge anything that is proposed by the deep state, like the BBI, like extending the term of parliament, the term of government. Those are things they want to.
Okay. We'll definitely get to talk about extending the term of government and all that. And Jogu, allow us to shift focus just briefly, because this is yet another story that touches on the larger Western or Nyanza region. And it's all about the COVID-19 numbers. These particular regions, Kisumu, Migori, Homa Bay, seem to have actually gotten a surge in the number of infections. Let's just take a look at this particular story that highlights this, because it has been covered on page 7 of the Daily Nation, where a new coronavirus infectious zone is taking shape, with rising new infections stemming out of counties that once recorded low numbers. This comes at a time when gatherings have been held across the country despite COVID-19 protocols advising against it. KTN's Health and Science reporter Sada Hassan gives us a lowdown.
On 1st June, all roads led to the county of Kisumu, where President Uhuru Kenyatta led the country to mark Madaraka Day celebrations. Organizers insist that COVID-19 protocols were observed inside the Jomo Kenyatta Stadium. However, outside the situation was chaotic. As guests left the stadium, huge crowds mobbed them and COVID-19 protocols, with all caution thrown to the wind. A week later, COVID-19 new infections are rising steadily, especially in zones that once recorded low numbers. Kisumu County has topped in new infections in the last 6 days, with 330 new cases, followed by Nairobi, which remains the epicenter at 319 new infections in the same period. The county of Siaya is now also of great concern after recording a sharp increase in the last 3 days and falls at position 3 in new infections over the last 6 days. Meanwhile, the county of Mombasa is experiencing a drop in COVID-19 infections, with Kilifi seemingly catching up to record high new infections. Now, all eyes are on the lakeside region, which has witnessed huge gatherings in recent weeks. In the last 24 hours, Kenya has recorded 166 new infections out of a sample size of 3,561. This represents a positivity rate of 4.7%. The total number of COVID-19 infections stands at 172,491. 23 people have succumbed to the virus on diverse dates, raising the fatalities to 3,287. 1,177 are admitted in hospitals, 105 in ICU, 26 are on ventilatory support, and 157 are on oxygen. So far, less than 9,000 Kenyans have received the second dose of the AstraZeneca vaccine. On Saturday, Denmark announced that it will ship 358,000 doses of Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine to boost Kenya's vaccination drive. Sada Hassan, KTN News.
And so that's the latest in terms of the positivity rate in the Nyanza region. Arthur Odera, does this concern you, especially with the weight that will be felt in public and private health facilities if this trend continues?
First of all, Jesse, I think it's important to mention that I wish the Ministry of Health or the COVID team would start giving us weekly and monthly averages and give us a rolling average so that we can track and as a nation have a sense of which direction we are going. Because, I mean, take an example of on Saturday, the positivity rate was 9.7. Yesterday, it was 4.7. You will find tomorrow it goes to 10 or 8. Or so it's yo-yoing in a way that it's very difficult to keep track or whether the trend generally nationwide is downward or upward or static. We need to have a sense of that because I think awareness is a big weapon against this disease if we spread awareness across the country. But having said that, in my view, the Madaraka Day celebrations in Kisumu shouldn't have been held the way they were held. There was no social distancing. People traveled from far and wide. Nairobi people were there in their thousands, and people from what traditionally we call Western Province were there in their thousands. And essentially, it was a super spreader event, if we are honest. And it should, this for me is a big contradiction between what we avow to be our thrust to try and minimize infections and to try and bring to a close the danger that COVID-19 poses vis-a-vis our actions. Because our actions in celebrating that event, I think, overruled good sense and you know, confined it to the periphery. It should never have been held because by the time the event was being held and the build-up of it started, already Kisumu was red. Kisumu was showing signs, Kisumu was leading in terms of the daily reportage, and therefore we should have taken that to heart and said, no, we don't want to risk these lives anymore. Let us not hold the event. It could have been held, you know, virtually, or you know, minimize the numbers to some extent. If you saw the scenes at Kondele, for example, when those, you know, Kondele is the bastion of Kisumu politics, and if you stop Kondele, you would need to be gone, you know, somewhere if you can't manage Kondele. So if you see scenes like that, the scenes in the stadium, all the events that took place before that, minimal social distancing, minimal people in masks, and there was a lot of exposure. Is it then a surprise that we are seeing an increase in the numbers of infections? Not at all. We should have expected it. We should have avoided it. We should have done everything possible to prevent an escalation of what was already a problem by then. And remember, Kisumu is a hub for the whole of Western Kenya in terms of trade, in terms of travel. Kisumu Airport serves, you know, all the way from Kakamega, Vihiga, you know, Busia, Bungoma, Homa Bay, you know, Siaya, Migori, Nyamira, Kisii. It serves all those areas, and perhaps Kericho as well. And it could go as far as Bomet. So you can imagine if Kisumu has high infections and there's all this interaction, travel in and out, you can imagine the potential impact and the potential ability of the virus to spread far and wider than Kisumu. So really, I think the trick now must be coordination between national government and the county governments must step up, really step up. To provide not just you know, treatment and home care, but also education. Education in the rural areas is going to be the critical factor that saves this nation from COVID-19.
As simple as that, because adherence to the COVID-19 containment measures are it's your job as an individual. Of course, enforcement might not happen all the time, but at the end of the day, your health is your utmost priority. So that particular story has been covered on page 7 of the Daily Nation. Kyoko, allow me to shift focus. On page 7 of the Standard this time round, they question the police meddling in the by-elections, where a section of political leaders have since come out to condemn the police officers' involvement in elections, arguing that the country could be heading in the wrong direction this close to the 2022 general election. And we saw the scenes that characterized the by-elections in, at times, heavy police presence, that some political heads mentioned that it might cause voter apathy. Others mentioned that there were agents for various political parties. So a lot of fingers have been pointed at the police in terms of being accused of favoritism. Well, what's your take on this?
I think we need to have an understanding that the 2010 Constitution, when it was passed, there was an overwhelming majority to make sure that the Kenya Police is a Kenya Police Service, utumishi kwa wote, not utumishi kwa serikali. It's not service to government, but it is service to all of us as Kenya, so that it is divorced from instructions from the presidency, instructions from Office of the President, actually, and the Minister of Interior. Now, over time, those gains that were enshrined in the Constitution have been reversed step by step. The security law that was passed in the 11th, or is it the 10th Parliament? The 10th Parliament that stifled the space for operation of the police have come to haunt us. Because today, ordinarily, in a polling station, in a tallying center, the returning officer should be able to instruct the inspector or the chief inspector who's in charge of that particular station, because the police should come under the mandate of the IEBC. However, in the current by-elections that we've seen, starting from the Msambweni one, what has been happening is that police are getting instructions from the traditional chain of command, which is Office of the President. Now, Office of the President is currently in conflict with the Office of the Deputy President and whoever is perceived to be linked with the Office of the Deputy President. So UDA activities are the ones that are being tear-gassed. You saw the former Minister Kiunjure being tear-gassed. You saw recruitment drives that are being done by UDA being tear-gassed, but political activities of other people perceived to be close to the president happening. Actually, it is very ridiculous that you find a meeting of political aspirants, 50 or even 100, and these are responsible people by and large, for you to offer yourself for leadership, in an organized room, being tear-gassed, yet the events in Kondele happened in full glare and were facilitated by police. Now, we need to be careful about these telltale signs. When the police revert back to the executive, as currently is, when the judiciary is muzzled, as is, when you give political parties the right to nominate into the selection panel, who have the majority, it therefore means IEBC composition will be influenced by political parties. A situation where Chairman Kriegler said the problem of filling IEBC with politically aligned individuals is that each one of them at one particular time will start pulling off to the direction of his political master. That's why you need neutral people at IEBC. When you look at these things in totality, and then you bring in this dalliance President Uhuru is having with the military. Okay. When you bring all of them, you have the police in check now, the military is happy indulging in civil activities and civil trying to make profit as a business venture. The military is not a profit-making thing. You have the IEBC muzzled, you have the judiciary under choke. Then we have all the elements that create room for a dictatorship to be established. You have all the room that create room for doubt in an election. You have created ample space for us to go back to the 2007 post-election violence. Because remember, the reason 2007 PEV happened, yes, partly was because the results were not all that. But again, Raila Odinga expressed his fear that he cannot go and present